The NHL is filled with some amazing talent, and usually those kind of players come from being selected in the first round of the draft. Well, my weekly NHL tier list is back, and today I'm pretty excited about this one. Today we are going to be looking back at every first overall pick in the NHL since the year 2000 and ranking them based on the tier list that I have right here. At their best, they can be generational talents, but at their worst, they can be a flat-out bust. Now, before we get into this, I do weekly tier lists or hockey-related tier list just in general, so if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that now, and let's get right into it. The first pick on my list is Rick DiPietro. Back in 2000, the Islanders drafted DiPietro, hoping that they would get the next franchise goalie for New York, and in the early stages of his career, he was a pretty solid goaltender for the Islanders, having a few good seasons from around 2003 to 2007, until falling off in 2008 and never playing another year as a starter in the league. The issue with this pick was not only DiPietro being a huge bust, but the fact that the Islanders ended up signing him to a 15-year deal in 2006 worth over $67.5 million, and still currently the team is paying him, which is just brutal for their cap. DiPietro was solid for around 4 years, but as a first overall pick, he was a complete bust. Put him in the flat-out bust category, he may be one of the worst guys on this list. In 2001, the Atlanta Thrashers choose Ilya Kovalchuk with their first overall pick, and I have to say he was not only a success for their franchise, but just generally as a player. Kovalchuk finished his career with 443 goals, 433 assists, totaling for 876 points. He won a Rocket Richard Trophy in the 2003-2004 season, but never really managed to earn himself much outside of that, and also never won a Stanley Cup. Some people may have him as a Hall of Fame player, but for me, it's just right below that. He was a very solid first overall pick and had a great career, but I don't want to put very good players in the Hall of Fame. You have to be great. So I will put him as a top line contributor, but he's definitely on the fringe of that and Hall of Fame player. Next year, 2002, and Rick Nash is selected first overall by the Columbus Blue Jackets, and man was this guy a beauty to watch. Every time someone mentions his name, I just think of some of the amazing dangles he put on while he was in the league. Nash was a fantastic player, playing in over 1,060 games with 437 goals, 368 assists for a total of 805 points. Now, if you look at both Nash and Kovalchuk, their careers are pretty similar. They were both very talented players who both won one Rocket Richard, but outside of that, didn't have much when it comes to individual awards, and neither ever won a Stanley Cup. Now, I'm going to put Nash in the top line contributor category, but like I said, he's just like Kovalchuk. They're kind of on that line of Hall of Fame and top line contributor. But when it comes to Nash, he was just so fun to watch growing up that if you haven't checked out some of his highlights, you should go do that after this video. 2003, the Pittsburgh Penguins select Marc-Andre Fleury. I believe Fleury is the last goalie to be selected first overall by any team, meaning that there hasn't been one in around 20 years, which is kind of crazy if you think about it. Fleury has been a fantastic goalie since he started with Pittsburgh. He is second all-time in wins, right behind Martin Brodeur, has a career save percentage of .912 and a goals against average of 2.59. Fleury is still playing at age 39 years old with the Minnesota Wild and has won 3 Stanley Cups in his career with Pittsburgh, a Vezina back in the 2020-2021 season with the Vegas Golden Knights, and now here is my hot take when it comes to this player. I think Fleury is a generational talent when it comes to being a goalie. Now, it's hard to compare players and goalies, but when I think of the best goalies in his decade, Fleury is always one of the first guys that comes to mind. Now, the reason I'm not going to put him in the generational talent category is because 2 of the cups that he has on his resume, he wasn't the starter for in the playoffs. It was actually Matt Murray in those back-to-back years. So while he may not be a generational talent, he is hands down a Hall of Fame category without question. Fleury is one of the best goaltenders in league history. 2004, and the Washington Capitals select Alex Ovechkin. This one I don't really need to spend all that much time on. 1,514 points in his career, a Stanley Cup champion in 2019, 3-time league MVP, and more Rocket Richard trophies than you can even imagine. He's about to break Wayne Gretzky's career goal total for most goals by any player in league history, and is easily a generational player without question. Ovi's impact on the game can't be put into words. Next year, and another generational talent right out the gate, Sidney Crosby selected as the first overall pick by the Pittsburgh Penguins, and Crosby has arguably been the best and most consistent player since entering the league. Crosby has 1,550 total career points, is a 3-time Stanley Cup champion, 2-time playoff Conn Smythe winner, and a 2-time league MVP. Crosby, like Ovechkin, helped change the game forever, and maybe everyone's favorite player. Crosby easily goes in the generational talent tier. He has changed the game forever, and his impact on the NHL will never be forgotten. In 2006, the Avalanche select Erik Johnson as their first overall pick. Now, Johnson was a solid defenseman for most of his career, but I wouldn't consider him to be a first overall pick material. He won one Stanley Cup, but wasn't a huge factor in the Colorado Avalanche's run. He has no individual awards and has never really been considered a top 10 defenseman in the league. Now, as a first overall pick, he was just a good player, but not really worth the pick. So I'm going to put him in the good but not worth the pick category. It seems very fitting for him. 2007, and the Chicago Blackhawks select Patrick Kane with their first overall pick, and the rest is just history. Three-time Stanley Cup champion, Conn Smythe winner in 2012-2013, league MVP in the 2015-16 season, 1,253 career points, and the filthiest hands in league history. This guy was my favorite player growing up and is still my favorite player to watch. For me, I'm going to put him in the generational talent category. A lot of people might not consider him to be this, but growing up, Kane was the most talked about player in the league. I remember everybody had either a jersey or a t-shirt of this guy. He was just so talented in his prime, and in an era with Crosby and Ovechkin, it seriously takes a lot for you to break over those guys and be one of the more popular players. Kane helped turn the Blackhawks team into a dynasty in the early 2010s and is easily a generational talent in my opinion. Next year, 2008, and Stamkos is the first overall pick taken by the Tampa Bay Lightning. Stamkos has 1,101 points in his career. He's a two-time Stanley Cup champion and has been a great captain and leader for the Lightning over the years. While he has some great achievements, he has never really been the best player in the league, and I'm not sure if he has ever even been top 5 for most people. I love Stammer, but for me, he's not really a generational talent player, but for sure he's a lock for the Hall of Fame easily. Put Stamkos in the Hall of Fame category. He's not a generational player, but he definitely has been one of the best players over the past decade. In 2009, the New York Islanders select John Tavares, and for the most part of his career, he's been a pretty solid 80-point player in the league. Tavares at the start of his career had such high expectations, and looked like he might be the next Crosby, but since joining the Maple Leafs, he just hasn't really been anything special. JT is a great player and a solid leader, but has never won any individual awards and has never won a Stanley Cup. He has 1,009 points in his career and may finish in the Hall of Fame, but for me, I'm going to put him as a top-line contributor. Both Nash and Kovalchuk won more individual awards than Tavares, and even though he has a few more points, the talent discrepancy between those three players, it isn't all that much. So put him as a top line contributor. I think that's a solid spot for JT. In 2010, the Oilers select Taylor Hall as their first overall pick, and the potential for this guy was through the roof. In his career, Hall has never really been one of the best players in the league. I mean, he did win a Hart Trophy with the Devils, but outside of that, he really hasn't accomplished much. His highest point total was his MVP season with 93 points, and he's never even gotten close to replicating that year. Hall is a fine player, and the skill is there, but I wouldn't consider him to be a first overall pick material. So I'm going to put him in the good but not worth the pick category. I think that's pretty suiting for him. Next year, and the Oilers go back-to-back with their first overalls, and this time they select Ryan Nugent-Hopkins with their first pick. His career is almost identical to Taylor Hall's. Minus the MVP season, his best year was the 104 points that he put up last year, but let's be honest, that's a one-off considering that's his only career where he cracked over 70 points. Just like Hall, he's not really anything special. They're both great players, but definitely aren't worth those first overall picks, those game changers that you expect to get from a draft pick like that. I would consider them both to be average second or first line players that will get you points but not really be difference makers for your teams. Put him and Hall both in the good but not worth the pick tier. I think that's a suitable spot for both of those guys. Another year, another first overall pick for the Edmonton Oilers, and this time they selected Nail Yakupov, who is literally the definition of a bust. Playing with the Oilers, Blues, and Avalanche, he scored a measly 136 points in 350 games played, and is now completely out of the league at this point. With 3 first overall picks in 3 years, the Oilers currently have Ryan Nugent-Hopkins still on their roster, and Yakupov, well, he's going in the bust category for me. After a few iffy years for the Oilers, in 2013, the Avalanche select Nathan MacKinnon as their first overall pick, and this one was a huge success for the club. Nate has been a complete dog since entering the league and has become the driving force for the Avalanche. Nate led the Avs to a Stanley Cup in 2022 and now is leading the league in points with 82 points in 48 games played. Nate may not be considered generational to most people, but when he is finished with his career, there will be no debate. I'm getting ahead of the trend on this one and putting Nate in the generational generational talent category. Behind McDavid, there is no better player than McKinnon at this point. His game is so solid all around, and I would take him on my roster any day of the week. Next year, 2014, and there's a little bit of discussion on this one, but I think the answer is pretty clear. In 2014, the Panthers select Aaron Ekblad with their first overall pick, and let's be honest, he's just a good pick. I would never put Ekblad in the Hall of Fame, and I wouldn't consider him to be this sensational talent. He's just a good player, but in my opinion, was he really worth the first overall pick it took to get him? I don't know about that. I'm going to put him in the good but not worth the pick category, but I'd love to see how his career finishes out because he could easily move up on this list. 2015, and we all know this one, the Edmonton Oilers select Connor McDavid, and this one is just a no-brainer. McDavid will go down as the greatest player in NHL history when his career is finished. In 611 games, he has 913 points, 5 Art Ross awards, 3 MVPs, 4 Ted Lindsays, and the only thing left for McDavid to accomplish is getting his first Stanley Cup. But outside of that, I think almost everyone can agree he's a generational talent. In 2016, the Toronto Maple Leafs select Auston Matthews. Matthews is a polarizing figure in the NHL. In some ways, he's overhyped, and in some ways, he's undervalued. Because Matthews plays for the Toronto Maple Leafs, a lot of fans seem to not like his game. But honestly, Matthews has been the best scorer I've ever seen play the game. Currently, Matthews is on pace to break both Gretzky's and Ovechkin's career goal total, and has 39 goals in 48 games played this season, on pace to score close to 70 goals this year. I don't think Matthews is currently a generational talent, but the potential really is there. I'm going to place him in the Hall of Fame category. I feel like eventually he's going to be a lock for that, and who knows if he's going to be able to win a Stanley Cup. I believe one day he will, but I'm just not sure if it's going to be with the Maple Leafs. In 2017, Nico Hischier is selected by New Jersey as the first overall pick. Hischier has been a solid player for New Jersey and is a key piece in their young core. Right now, if I had to predict his standing as a first overall pick, I would place him in the good but not worth the pick category. I think the potential is there and he could be a top line contributor, but I just don't know if he's going to be the talent that some of these other guys on this list have been or will be. So I'm going to leave him in here. I think at his peak he could be a Hall of Famer, but right now I'm just going to put him in this category. In 2018, the Buffalo Sabres select Rasmus Dahlin with their first overall pick, and this guy looks like he could be a stud in the league. Dahlin has signed his first contract with the Sabres, but on a team that has had little playoff experience, I'm not sure if he can really be judged just yet. At his ceiling, I believe that Dahlin can be a Hall of Fame player, but at the moment, I think he's just a good player, a good top-line defenseman with a lot of potential. Now again, it's very early in his career, but let's see how things play out because the potential is there, but right now, I'm going to put him in the top-line player tier. 2019, and after drafting Nico Hischier first overall in 2017, New Jersey has their sights set on building for the future, and what better way to do that than to draft Jack Hughes with your first overall pick. Hughes is only 22, but he's already showing an insane amount of potential. Last season, he potted 99 points at just 21 years old and helped New Jersey reach the second round of the playoffs. At this point in his career, I can't predict anything, but I believe Hughes is going to be a generational talent by the time his career is over. But I can't say that just yet, so I'm going to put him in the Hall of Fame category with his ceiling being generational. This may be an early trend for me, but I just think this guy's going to be a stud by the time his career is over. In 2020, the New York Rangers select Alexis Lafreniere with their first overall pick. I don't blame Laf for his slow start. There's a lot of contributing factors when it comes to the early stages of his career. I mean, he's still super young, and we can't really make any sort of judgment at this point. He's been playing third line minutes for the first few seasons of his career. If I had to guess his ceiling, it would be a top line contributor, and that's where I'm going to put him, I guess, right now. Give him some time, Rangers fans. I know some people have talked about moving him, but I think he's going to be a solid player for your team. Who knows what he could really be at the end of his career? Maybe he'll just turn it on one day, but right now I think at his peak he could be a top line contributor. Now the last three are all way too soon to judge. Owen Power will most likely be a top pairing defenseman throughout his career. I see so much potential in this kid, and with him and Dahlin both a part of that Sabres lineup, they will be solid defensively for years. Slavkovsky, it's a bit iffy at this point. He hasn't showed much with the Habs, but he's still so young, and we need to give him a little bit more time before we can make a solid judgment. And Connor Bedard is Connor Bedard. At his ceiling, he'll be a generational player and has already shown flashes in his first season, but again, it's only half a season. We have no idea what kind of player he's going to be in 5 years, not to mention say 20 years. But this is my first overall NHL draft pick tier list. Do you agree with my tiers? And what other tier list would you like to see related to the NHL or hockey? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you guys in the next one.